Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our Saturday upgrading commander build video on the Tier 10 British light cruiser, the Minotaur. This is a 2025 edition. I did one in 2021, back when I was first doing the upgrade commander build videos, and it's rather long-winded, and I'm really hoping to make this tight and concise within 30 to 35 minutes. I want to talk about a radar build, which is what I run, and I also want to talk about going for the full smoke build, including the unique upgrades. So, with that being said, let's talk about what kind of light cruiser the Minotaur is. Minotaur is a light cruiser, but she plays most effectively at mid range, and for tier 10, I usually set like, let's say 12 to 15 kilometers. But for Minnow, you can actually easily pull off playing less, especially if you go for the full conceal build. You play around your smoke, you play around your concealment, you can easily play within like that 9-kilometer range. You just have to be mindful if the flank or position you're fighting at, enemy team has a very strong presence, then you probably want to back off a little bit and be more in that, perhaps that 12 to 15-kilometer range. It just depends. So she's mid-range. She can easily fight close quarters as well, as ironic as that sounds, because we'll look at her armor in a minute. That's because she gets 16 torpedoes, 533 millimeter torpedoes that do 10-kilometer range. I'll talk about them. They do 16,000 damage each, full maximum damage. So kind of a zesty boat. I've had some fun YOLOs with the Minotaur, but it requires being mindful in that approach. Armor layout, covered in 16 millimeter. We talked about it. I showed it during the Friday highlight yesterday. So you will eat a lot of damage quite easily from cruisers, heavy cruisers, battleships, CVs, right? That easily can penetrate through. You do have to be mindful of your broadside when we're talking about things like the hull, the Elbing, the Schultz, other Ragnar, other destroyers that have larger main caliber gun. You do get a 101 millimeter armor belt. The Wiles Wiki talks about being able to bounce, I think like we can bounce 150s, 203s, and 220s. You can bounce, just depends on your angle. Otherwise, you're really vulnerable, especially when we peel things back and you see the Citadel. If you're aiming at a Minotaur, you should really be aiming beneath the smokestacks. That's where you have this step up in the Citadel armor scheme. So it is an exposed Citadel, right? So maybe you'd be a little safer if someone fires up towards the front, but the midsection, of course, is your weakest. So it's very easy, especially from the rear, as you can see the Citadel right there, because you have the flat bottom, if you will. It doesn't take very much to Citadel a Minotaur from the rear. Kind of typical among the British ships that have that flat butt, that flat stern, if you will. So do be mindful of that, but I mean, otherwise it's just 16 millimeter. You're easily penetrable from many different directions. In terms of the gun mount armor, it's 102, 51 on the back or side back, and 51 on the far back, and then 38, 38. So your front is the strongest, but it's also really easy to have your turrets knocked out on this ship. So let's start off when we go through the modules and the upgrades and even our signals and commander, you're going to see radar build, okay? And then I'm going to flip it around. I'll make it an easy picture, kind of showing the full overview of the smoke build as well. So let's crack into it. So we have 10 152 millimeter guns, 2.8 second reload time, 180 degree turn time of 5.4 seconds, maximum AP shell damage 3,200. The hull, you start off with 43,300, and you can see I have a 21-point commander, so that means I'm not running survivability expert. My opinions on this have kind of changed a little bit over the years, particularly due to the new combat signal we have here, being Charlie Kilo. But I'll kind of talk about why I don't have survivability expert with this build. But I'm going to actually reinvent the radar build a little bit to include survivability expert. So you can, between Charlie Kilo and survivability expert, get up to, I think it's like about 50,000 hit points. So that's actually quite large difference there. Torpedoes, we have a second 2-point skill on our torpedoes, so that's why you're seeing an 86.4 second reload time. I think otherwise it's closer to like 96 seconds or something. So these are deadly torpedoes, but it requires you to be close enough, or maybe using a smoke screen, someone's charging you, right? 10-kilometer range, 16,767 damage, 62 knot speed, and a 1.3 kilometer detectability range. Your gunfire control system, 15.8. So that's pretty solid in generally speaking for tier 10 cruisers. The light cruisers, at least, you get around 15 to in the 16 range is typically what you find there. Some exceptions. Propulsion is 33.5 knots. We can take Sierra Mike and bump that up to 35.2 knots, which I do recommend doing. The first slot, you're going to go for the main armaments mod 1. As you saw, the armor scheme on the main battery turrets, not your torpedoes are pretty exposed, right? Being just here in the side of your ship, and a lot of HE spam is directed that way. So it is definitely worth, I think, building into the main armaments mod 1. This reduces the risk of your main battery and torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, and your survivability for torpedo tubes and main battery goes up by plus 50%, and the main battery repair time and torpedo tube repair time, if either of those should be incapacitated, is reduced by negative 20%, meaning you get your torpedoes and your main battery back online faster. Otherwise, it's just an AA secondary skill, not worth it, and then to plus 40% on your consumable action time. But as traditional, it's not really worth it because it's just 5 seconds. So you'd only be adding like a few seconds or like 2-3 seconds. So not worth it. So best investments there. The second slot, if you're going to play the radar Minotaur, then you are going to want to take Surveillance Radar Mod 1. Now, let's say you're a newer player, you don't have the coal that it costs to invest. I will go into that, especially when I look at the smoke build Minotaur. But let's say you don't have the coal resources to be able to do that, then you're going to want to do engine room protection in the meantime. Risk of engine and steering gears becoming incapacitated, negative 20%. If either of those should be incapacitated, the repair time is reduced, so you get them back online faster by 20%. Otherwise, with radar build, you take the Surveillance Radar Mod 1. This adds a plus 20%. So then you're getting up to a 52.8 second action time on the radar when we do the full radar build, which also involves a 2-point skill on our commander. Let's see, I'll come back to this when we do the smoke build, okay? For now, we'll just focus on radar build. Then the aiming systems mod 1. This is a buff to your dispersion. Horizontally and vertical, you get tighter shell dispersion by negative 7%. So I'll put on the right side of the screen here showing you how your dispersion improves horizontally and vertically by 7%. You also do get a buff that your torpedo tubes traverse speed plus 20%. But you don't have any secondary battery on Minotaur, so disregard that as well. And we can check, it just shows main battery, no secondaries, if you're wondering if your ship has them or doesn't have them. Some light cruisers in the game do not have them. We'll talk about this guy with the smoke build when we circle back to that after going through the radar build. The fourth slot, you already have propulsion built in to the Minotaur. If they give you propulsion again in the fourth slot, that'd be something like the Des Moines unique upgrade, right? When you double up on the propulsion. So you go for steering gears mod 1. You have among the best propulsion in the game, and for a light cruiser, this gives you some of the best maneuverability as well. So you can see a 8.3 second rudder shift time, and turning circle radius right now shows as 750 meters. Otherwise, you don't mess with the other two. Fifth slot, again, radar build, you go for Consumables System Mod 1. This reduces your detectability range by negative 10%. Squadron detectability range, negative 10%. Dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship, plus 5%. So that means the enemy has slightly worse dispersion when they fire at your boat. So this is great for the radar build because means you're rocking a 9.0 kilometer concealment, and your radar is a 10 kilometer radar. So you actually get the stealth radar. I've caught destroyers off guard by actually detecting them with radar before they detect me, because I'm like, I think he's within the 10, but he's not the 9 yet, just because if I'm needing to before I get detected, I need to kill him quite quickly. Otherwise, if you catch them at the 9 kilometer when you're detected, you pop your radar, then it's like 8.5, and then they got to decide, do I keep pushing in or do I turn out, giving you nice flat to juicy broadside to your short fuse armor piercing shells, right? For the smoke build, I'll circle back and talk about the aerosol smoke curtain system, which is the unique upgrade. For the 6 slots, the main battery mod 3, this improves your main battery reload time and reducing it by negative 12%, so that's why you see the 2.8 seconds right now. Main battery traverse speed, negative 13%, but 5.4 seconds isn't bad at all. So this is really what you want to go for here. You don't bother with Torpedo Tubes mod 2. If you want to do a torpedo build, Minnow, then I'd say do torpedo build Brisbane, because the Brisbane gets even more torpedoes and their 13.5 kilometer range. Gunfire Control System mod 2, this would extend your main battery firing range out by plus 16%. So right now it's 15.8, so over 17. I really wouldn't recommend that because Minotaur doesn't play well at the longer range because of the shell arcs. Your AP will be coming kind of more down onto the target, so you won't be getting as much pins. You'll get more ricochets because it just doesn't loses some of that shell velocity at range. So main battery mod 3. If you really wanted to do an AA build, then of course Brisbane and Minotaur are the second best in the game, and now you have the new Dutch ships. The Utrecht is the king now at tier 10 in terms of AA cruisers. But it's very capable to take this. I do the 4.8 scale Minotaur. So if you really wanted to do that, you could, but maybe it'd be funner to do that instead on like something like Utrecht, where building more into the main battery is a bit funner on Minotaur, as an example. Armament-wise, you have, again, you have 152 millimeter guns. Now, the difference between Brisbane and Minotaur, as an example, is your fuse time is a lot less on Minotaur. I don't remember the arming threshold. I think it's like a 0. I'll put it on the screen here. It might be like 0.005 seconds or 5. Yeah, on the shell fuse time. And then it's like more of a standard AP pin fuse time on the Brisbane. So on destroyers, that's why with Minotaur, you penetrate broadside destroyers, where on Brisbane, it would take something like a Ragnar L-Beam to fuse the AP shells because they have a lot thicker armor. So otherwise, you just overpin destroyers with Brisbane often when they're broadside. But with Minotaur, that's not the case. You eat them for breakfast. So that's kind of why Minotaur is a really great destroyer hunter, in my opinion. But beyond that, you have a maximum damage of 3,200, initial shell velocity, 768 meters a second. 15.8 range, and you see the 132 meters there as a dispersion. But you only get armor piercing, so Minotaur thrives best in getting broadside targets. Bowen, especially Russian Bowen targets, tanky Bowen targets, will be very difficult to deal with. But that's also where your torpedoes come in when you get Bowen target, as an example, within your torpedo range. So right now, with our build, we have an 86.4 second reload time, 10 kilometer range, 16,767 maximum damage, 62 knot speed, detectability range, 1.3 kilometers. Then we get into depth charges. So you only get 4 bombs in a charge. So that means if you use both charges back to back, you get 8 depth charges. They do 5,750 damage each. A reload time of 40 seconds. So there are other cruisers that do better in this regard, but hey, at least you get depth charges, right? Consumable-wise, your damage control party, standard for tier 10 cruisers. It's a 5-second action time, a 60-second cooldown time. You have an unlimited number of charges on the Minotaur. So you get one of your trump cards as Minotaur is the ability to come back from the dead, kind of like Conqueror or Devastation as an example. So you get a specialized repair team, and you really need that, especially it's quite frequently you'll get slapped. Being citadeled is kind of a norm somewhat in Minotaur. Sometimes you can go sneakily through an entire battle and never get citadeled, so congrats to you if that happens. But you can see the HP per second is at plus 866. If we take the India Delta combat signal, which goes by plus 20%, then you can see, boop, 1,039. So you want to take India Delta if you're playing ranked randoms clan battles, as an example. You have a 20-second action time, 80-second cooldown time, number of consumables 4, and we can actually get the cooldown time even lower in 3 ways. So I'll talk about that with the commander and signals. Then you have the hydroacoustic search. So it's a 5-kilometer hydro, detection torpedoes 3.5. This very much helps, especially when you play smoke minnow. I'll talk about that when I go over the smoke build. Consumable action time, 110. We can bump that up as well. Cooldown time 120 seconds, and we get 4 of them because we're also taking Superintendent. Radar or smoke. I'll come back to smoke later. For now, let's focus in on the radar. So as I shared previously, it's a 10-kilometer range. We've gone for the full radar consumable build, extending our duration of our radar time. So 52.8 seconds. Very, very helpful when hunting destroyers in terms of how I play Minotaur. You take out the destroyers, it makes life a lot easier than taking on the cruisers and other battleships as an example. And we get 4 of them, and also taking Superintendent. Combat signal wise, well, we do definitely want to take Charlie Kilo. So 43,300 without, 45,500 with. So that's very nice, you know, now that we no longer have Juliet Charlie, the detonation combat signal, since they took detonation out of the game. Another one of the many differences from the 2021 video to now the 2025 video on Minnow. And then otherwise, we're going to look at taking November Foxtrot. This reduces our consumable preparation reload time down by -5%. So now you see 57 on the damage control party, 76 on the specialized repair teams, 114 on the cool for hydro, and then 114 on the radar. Then we also have Sierra Bravo. This extends our hydroacoustic search consumable action time by +10%. So then now you're going to see 121 seconds versus 110 seconds. So I do run that here as well. And then coming over to the November Echo Set 7, this is a +5% on your continuous AA damage and damage from AA shell explosions. So if I unclick out of that and then I open up the AA defense, you're going to see 518 and 2,363. Changes to 543, 2,481. But something with the new CVB work, they're trying to figure out, they're talking about removing shell explosions. So do keep that in mind, that this might reflect differently in the future once that's landed, or maybe we are in the future and you're watching this video now. But in having among the best AA at tier 10, then to me it's very nice to run this, because then you see the AA 99. That's also reflecting one of the 4-point skills we're taking on our commander. So we still have 2 slots left on our signals. So then I take the Hotel Yankee, +50% when ramming an enemy, -20% when ramming an enemy. So sometimes I've gotten die hard with Minotaur, ironically, but sometimes destroyers want to ram you, submarines want to ram you, right? So it's really funny when you take this and they don't. Otherwise, the last skill I run is the Juliet Whiskey. This is for increasing the chances of causing a flood by +15%. So maybe I'll put the before and after here on the right as well. So anything's kind of helpful. I mean, otherwise you're just trying to look at reducing your fire time on Minotaur and that. But I'm like, hey, let's make the torpedoes a little bit more deadly. Okay, time-wise, we look to be doing pretty good. All right, so this is the current build, and this is what you saw yesterday, and I'm going to critique this build into something different going now into 2025, because one of the things I don't like about the current build is now with the addition of Charlie Kilo to give us more hit points, right? So we went from 43,300 to 45,500. There's more of a benefit now to running Survivability Expert. I mean, there always has been, but part of why I never ran Survivability Expert, excluding the existence of Charlie Kilo, was like, well, if I'm going to get slapped by Minnow, like, regardless of how big the slap is, I'm probably just going to die. So there's kind of some pros and there's maybe some cons on that perspective, an opinion that I have. But now to be able to bump your hit points up to 50,000 from 45,500, it's like, you know, I think there's actually some benefits there. So we're running this in normal commander. So again, this is the current build that I had in yesterday's video. There's also that fill the tubes to reduce the torpedo reload time down. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to send this guy to the reserve, and we're going to put on Andrew Cunningham. Now, Andrew Cunningham, I have him set up on Devastation. He would probably work really well on Goliath or Conqueror. But I got him just in mind for Devastation. I'm running a build there. But let's just go ahead and bring him. Ooh. Yeah, I play Minotaur a lot more than I do Devastation, so I was like, it's going to cost me to do this, which sucks, but hey, I guess it is what it is right now. And I think I meant to use doubloons, but oh well, it is what it is. So let's talk about doing a radar build or a smoke build here with Andrew Cunningham. So let's start this off now. So what I would look at doing, let me just go ahead and click on the build itself. There's kind of two ways we can flip this in terms of talking about a radar build on Minotaur. So let me just talk about through some of the skills. I'm leaning two ways in my mind of what I can do here. This is probably the gutsiest. This was probably a little bit smarter. And then like this would probably be the safest in terms of the radar build, but it comes at a bit of a cost in terms of our consumable action time. So let me just talk through this. So first we take Last Stand. The ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine and steering gears incapacitated. So that's helpful so you're not dead in the water or you're just spinning around in a circle. It's definitely needed on Minotaur, especially when you're doing radar Minotaur. This is like pretty mandatory in my opinion. And then for your a 3-point commander, then there's going to be two ways you can build. One is you can go for the consumable enhancements as your second point skill or 3-point commander. And this gives you the longer action time on the radar and also your hydroacoustic search. So remember how I was talking about that we had a 52.8 second action time on the radar. Now it's a 48 second action time, and our hydroacoustic search time has actually dropped down from 121 to 110. So I've needed the extra 5 seconds on the radar, especially when you have a destroyer trying to run away and he's really close to death. So I quite appreciate having that. Let me just master that one. We know we're going to take it. So I've appreciated a lot having that additional 10% action time here. So probably we would end up going this route. Because if we do go this route, then either we are going to be taking incoming fire alert, or we're going to flip, or we're going to be even more ballsy and just take consumable specialist, right? So I'll talk about that here in a minute. So let's just say for now, you decided to go for the full radar build, and you took that skill. And then after that, I'd probably look at taking superintendent. This gives you a 4 specialized, 4 heals, 4 hydros, for radars. Otherwise, you just have 3 without it. So we do need that. We are a little DD hunter cruiser, right? Then I'll take the concealment expert. So then that brings us to 9 kilometers versus the 10.1 kilometer. Then we go for adrenaline rush. Then we'd go for survivability expert. So now you can see 50,200. Because it goes plus 450 for each ship tier. And then with Adrenaline Rush, each 1% of HP lost, it improves your reload time of your main battery, your torpedoes. You get a buff on your AA damage as well. So your artillery reload time might drop. It'll be like 2.7, 2.6, 2.5, 2.4, depending on how much you're able to get out of the Adrenaline Rush without dying. And then we take the 4-point skill. Something that changed here from the last Minotaur video is the something else that can be activated with the skill. So first off, the airstrike depth charge damage. It's just depth charge damage because we don't have the airstrike. You see we go from the 5,000, which is the standard, and then you see the 5,750, which was reflected when I showed you guys depth charges with armaments. And then you get that AA damage, plus 25%, and then plus 25% from the AA shell explosion. So when I showed you guys the AA, it was also reflecting that. So without 435, 1985, 543, 2481. So you can see that AA rating dropped from 94 when we were not running it. Well, it's not mastered right now, so it's not going to show up here apparently. But it would take us to the 99, as you see here, right? And then you're left with a kind of a crossroad decision if you do go for the full radar action time. Andrew Cunningham, I'll talk more about his skills because I want to talk about it in between the radar build and the smoke build in terms of his talents. But in terms of the enhanced skill he gets on a cruiser is the consumable specialist. This is a negative 10% consumable preparation reload time, and this affects both your hydro and your radar, or if we took smoke, it'd be hydro and smoke, right? So then we get our radar back faster, we get our hydroacoustic search back faster, or we get the smoke back faster. So then that's what that type of build would look like, in my opinion, for a full 21 pointer. Now, the one downside of this, we've really built into the consumables, we've built into the action time and the cooldown time. Otherwise, this one, I think standard is negative 7.5%, if I remember correctly, for cruisers. But the downside is we don't have the situational awareness that perhaps most light cruiser players will need. We don't have the priority target, which has a detection indicator that shows the number of opponents on the enemy team aiming at our ship with their main battery guns, or taking incoming fire alert, which is a cheaper skill, but it's a warning about a salvo fired at your ship from a distance of more than 4.5 kilometers. So that's sus. So it's very helpful. It's really dangerous to go without either of these two. If you went with this build I have on the screen, this means two things. One, you have good map awareness. Two, you have good situational awareness. Okay, those two things are not the same thing. They're different. You have good map awareness and you have good situational awareness in the moment. So that's why you see when a lot of cruiser players, like maybe some people you watch on Twitch that are good at light cruisers, they're constantly right mouse clicking to zoom out and see what's happening around them, even while they continue to fire with your main battery gun, right? You need that, especially when you play Radar Minotaur, in my opinion, right? So if I wanted to make this build a little bit more safer, probably what I would do is I would drop the consumable specialist. Because basically you have to compare these two skills against each other, and you say, hey, is it really worth me getting my radar, my hydro, my smoke back 10% faster, or is having kind of an aid helping me with the map awareness, the situational awareness, that whenever I'm getting shot at, hey, I need to use my propulsion, I need to try to juke, I need to use my rudder shift, right? So that's really helpful. If you want to be like really safe, I think, let's see. If you want to be really safe, then that means dropping consumable enhancements. So we're basically giving up 11 seconds action time on our hydro and 4.8 second action time on our radar. Or smoke will affect that by maybe, I have to look, maybe it's around 5 to 10 seconds. But we have the guarantee that we know if we're being aimed at before someone even pulls the trigger. Now, the build I showed you previously with Oliver Mansfield, Commander, I had priority target, right? And it was really helpful because immediately as soon as I'm being detected, I know I need to, like, okay, gotta see who's aiming at me. Can I see them? Or is it some battleship back behind islands who's undetected and I can't see him, right? So it gives you an advance warning. Priority target gives you advance warning. Incoming fire alert gives you immediate warning, like, hey, now you've been shot at a distance greater than 4.5 kilometers. So I would say the safest radar build would be this one, to take priority target. A slightly, we just reset all that. Secondly, kind of a mix of safety is to take incoming fire alert and dropping priority target. To be very dangerous with your life would be foregoing both of them and going for consumable specialists. Just have that faster cooldown time on your hydro and radar. Now, honestly, I said I really want to move into smoke build here in just a moment. What I'm amazed at in terms of dealing with destroyer players is how fast they're willing to just push back into you. I mean, if you're a skilled DD player and you run into a radar minnow and you know his radar's gone down, then that's the window when you want to push back in on a Radar Minotaur player because he can't do anything about it, right? As long as you don't get yourself detected. And then you're spotting him for your team. You're bullying him in that sense. And there's a lot of Destroyer players who don't think like that, as an example, and they just kind of meandrously push back in. They don't understand maybe perhaps the danger that they're in. So that's one of the reasons why I quite like thinking of the Consumable Specialist. So honestly, it's going to be up to you which of these three you feel best with. I'm still a little bit torn, if I'm being honest. I had to ask myself, you know, am I cool with losing the 4 seconds? Because I think this is kind of how I lean of the three the most. I really don't know if even myself, this really pushes me as a veteran player, a Unicum player in the game, to go without one of these two, because that just means I have to be even more paranoid when I play Minotaur, and when I'm running a build like this, I don't feel quite as paranoid because I kind of like priority target is the safety blanket, okay, for Radar Minotaur players. Okay, now let's talk about the smoke build. So we'll reset that selection, but I need to talk about the talents first. So you have the Witherer talent called the Ruthless talent. Upon earning a Witherer, you get a faster reload time on your main battery and torpedo tubes. Okay, you won't get this in a Minotaur because you don't have high explosive and you don't even have secondaries, right? The only way you could get this would be like setting submarines crazy on fire. Like that's the only thing you're gonna be able to do with your depth charges, right? So it's just you won't get that skill. The lightning fast is activates once per battle after causing 4 floods to enemy ships. So if you land, you get some floods on a submarine, some torps off, and get floods off on enemy ships. Then you can actually go 5% faster with Minotaur. That's fun, right? But it just means you have to be effective with your torpedoes or effective with your depth charges, and they're ship-based, right? And then really this is kind of the limelight here, is the Equipment Spoils talent. So it activates once per battle after destroying 2 enemy ships, meaning that when we do the build, when you take Superintendent, you're going to get a 5th. Okay, this adds the 4th radar, the 4th hydro, the 4th heal, or the 4th smoke. When you activate this, then you get a 5th radar, a 5th hydro, a 5th smoke screen, and a 5th heal, right? And it's pretty easy, I think, to get 2 kills on Minnow. At least it has been for me with playing the radar build. I can show you my stats and how frequently do we get profile. How frequently does that happen for me? Minotaur should be up towards the top. I probably already passed it. I wouldn't be surprised. Union Jack, come on. So I have 128 battles played, 60% run rate, 5.23 destruction ratio. But on average, I destroy almost exactly 2 ships per game, right? So that's actually pretty good. So for me, there's a definite perk, this being my main point in running Andrew Cunningham, to get that additional heal, that additional radar, that additional smoke or hydro, however I said it, okay? So that's what Andrew Cunningham does. Now, in terms of the smoke build, I'm going to just put it on the screen here to simplify it, okay? But in the meanwhile, you drop surveillance radar, you take hydroacoustic search, so you can get a plus 20% because you're fighting in smoke a lot, so you need to be aware of torpedoes, smoke screens, or torpedo magnets, right? So if I click on this, it'll take us into the armory. If we don't have the coupon, it's 17,000 coal. You get a coupon once a month. It is a negative 25% off upgrades, and that means it brings us down to 12,750 coal. So there's that. Third slot, we're going to take Smoke Generator Mod 1. This is going to improve your Smoke Generator consumable action time by plus 20%. Okay, so Smoke, right now it's 15 seconds. And taking this, it'll bump you up to 18 seconds. Okay, it gets better. Hang in there with me. And then on the 5th slot, we drop Concealment System, and we take Aerosol Smoke Curtain System. Now, this is going to affect your concealment, but your ship's detectability range is negative 5% versus negative 10%. Okay, so you still, you're like a 9.5 kilometer conceal. So it's still not bad as a whole when you take aerosol smoke curtain. But the big thing is here you see the smoke generator consumable action time is plus 300%. That's crazy good, right? So then you get up to 60-second and above action time on your smoke generator consumable, especially with some other skills we still haven't talked about yet. Things we got to do with the layout here. And then you also get a negative 10% on your ship consumables preparation and reload time. So that's actually pretty nice here. So if we think about that negative 10%, and that's just in general, it's not just for the smoke, right? We were talking about this guy, a negative 10%. So it's like, oh, I kind of get that. And you could multiply them together and then you're getting a negative 20% together, right? That's another one of the perks of this. But you do get that baked into the this skill if it makes your commander skill selection a little bit better. But it's a negative 20% to the smokescreen dispersion time. So right now, smokescreen dispersion time is 113. This drops you down to, I think it's beneath 100 seconds, like 96 seconds or something like that. Okay, so again, build on the screen here. You're changing those 3 slots out. And then we're going to drop the Juliet Whiskey. And then we're going to take X-Ray Papa. This is a plus 10% action time on your smokescreen or smoke generator consumable action time. Okay, 36 minutes. Wrap it up, Flimsy. Okay, now for smoke build, I would say this for smoke build, honestly. So you can actually see this isn't too different from the radar build, if you will. The only thing that becomes a difference here is, do you want an even longer lasting action time on the hydroacoustic search? And I'll try to put it on the screen somewhere here. But then you have an even longer lasting insane action time on the hydro or acoustic search, which or smoke screen, which I think is like you're looking at a 76-second action time as an example on the smoke screen. But otherwise, I would say if you're playing smoke Minotaur, this is a pretty comfortable build, because the reality is, even though you're in smoke, right, you still probably want to know what's happening around you. And we get in the same conversation like we did with radar build. If you feel like I'm okay with the smoke, it's not that big of a deal, then you could flip it out and do the alternative. So there you go. So there's your options for this video today. About 38 minutes almost. So I'm going to cap the video on the head. If you have questions or you want to share your opinions on your Minotaur build, let me know in the comments below, and others, of course, as well. So if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you have subscribed, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. Until next time, take care.